The coffee at the Lakeshore Grill had been sitting in the pot too long, and everyone who came in after 7 knew it. The woman at the counter knew it too, but she ordered it anyway, wrapping both hands around the mug like it was the only warm thing left in the room. Edmund Barr noticed her the way he noticed most things, quietly, without making a show of it. He was in the corner booth with a grilled cheese he hadn't started eating yet, going through an invoice on his phone, and the notification light on the screen kept blinking, and he kept ignoring it. It was a Thursday in late October, the kind of evening where the sky went dark by 5 and the parking lot outside was already slick with frost. The woman was in a wheelchair. She had positioned it sideways to the counter stool, and the geometry of that small adjustment, the way she'd angled herself to make it work without asking anyone for help, told him something about her before she said a single word. She had dark hair pulled back simply, and she was wearing a gray wool coat that was well-made but not showy. She looked like someone who had decided a long time ago not to waste energy on impressions. The man across from her did not look like the same kind of person. He was loud in the way certain men are loud without raising their voices, the way they take up space, lean back in their chairs, glance around to see who's watching. He was good-looking in a catalog way, wearing a jacket that cost real money, and he had put his phone on the table face up, which Edmund had always thought was one of the more telling things a person could do at dinner. He was talking, and the woman was listening, but her expression had gone somewhere careful and closed, the way a person looks when they are no longer listening but have not yet decided what to do about that. Edmund went back to his invoice. He heard the word convenient float over from the other booth, and then arrangement, and then something he didn't catch. He heard the woman say something low and even, and the man's voice come back sharper. Then silence. He looked up. The man had pushed a folded piece of paper across the table. The woman hadn't touched it. "I'm just being practical," the man said. "You said you wanted someone direct." "I said I appreciated honesty," the woman said. "That's a different thing." The man smiled in a way that wasn't a smile. "You're not going to find a lot of options, Fiona. I'm just saying. Given the..." He gestured vaguely at the wheelchair, the situation. The diner wasn't loud. The cook in the back was doing something with a spatula. The young woman behind the counter had gone still. Edmund set his phone face down on the table. "Given the situation," the man said again, like he was being patient with someone slow. Edmund stood up. He didn't plan it. Later, when he thought about it, he would not be able to identify the exact moment the decision happened. 1 second he was sitting, and then he wasn't. He picked up his coffee and walked the 4 steps to the booth and stopped at the end of the table. "Sorry to interrupt," he said. Both of them looked at him. The man's expression shifted into something territorial. The woman's face did something more complicated, a flicker of surprise, then wariness, then something quieter that he couldn't name. "I couldn't help hearing," Edmund said, to no one in particular. "You're welcome to come sit with me if you'd rather." He said it to the woman. He kept his voice level, not loud, not performing. The man laughed. "Excuse me, who are you?" "Nobody," Edmund said. "Just someone having dinner, then maybe mind your own business." "Maybe," Edmund agreed. He didn't move. The woman, Fiona, looked at him for a long moment. She had gray eyes, and the way she was looking at him was careful and assessing, like she was reading something small print. "Yes," she said. "Thank you." She backed her wheelchair away from the table with a practiced half-turn. The man said her name once, sharp. She didn't stop. Edmund stepped back to let her pass, and then he followed her to his corner booth, and they sat down together among his untouched grilled cheese and his face-down phone, and neither of them said anything for a moment while the man at the other booth made a show of gathering his jacket and his dignity and leaving. Her name was Fiona Adler. She told him that after the door had closed and the young woman behind the counter had brought over a fresh pot of coffee without being asked. "Edmund Barr," he said. She looked at his hands, which were on the table, and he knew what she was seeing. The knuckles, the old calluses, the particular wear that came from working with them for 30 years. He was 54. He had the kind of face that had never been striking and had grown into itself slowly, the lines of it making more sense now than they had at 30. "Thank you," Fiona said. "You didn't have to do that." "No," he agreed. She seemed to appreciate that he didn't disagree with her or tell her it was nothing. She wrapped her hands around the new coffee mug and looked out the window at the parking lot, where the frost was thickening on the windshields. Bad blind date, she said. Looked like it. He came recommended. She said it with a flatness that was almost dry humor. Highly recommended, apparently. By who? My sister. She paused. We have different definitions of several things. Edmund nodded. His grilled cheese was cold by now, but he picked it up and ate it anyway because leaving it felt wasteful, and he had never been good at wasting things. What do you do? Fiona asked. Building restoration, he said. Old structures, mostly. Heritage properties. She tilted her head slightly. In the city, mostly. Some rural work when it comes up. She was quiet for a moment. Then, my father built things, houses, mostly. He said the problem with modern construction was that nobody planned for 100 years anymore. Everyone planned for 20. He was right, Edmund said. She looked at him like she was recalibrating something. You mean that? I've been in buildings that are 200 years old and still doing their job, he said. And I've been in buildings from the 90s that are already crumbling. It's a question of whether you thought about who was coming after you. Fiona was quiet again. Outside, a car pulled in too fast and corrected. The cook in the back had moved on from the spatula to something that smelled like onions. My father died 4 years ago, she said. He left me the business. 31 employees, 2 facilities, a warehouse outside of Barry. She said it without particular inflection, the way someone recites something they have memorized. I had an accident 6 years ago. Car accident. She gestured briefly at the wheelchair. That's from that. I'm sorry, Edmund said. I don't need that, she said, but not unkindly. I mean, I know you mean it, but I'm used to it now, more or less. What I'm less used to is people treating it like the whole story. It's not a story, Edmund said. It's just something that happened. She looked at him for a long moment. The coffee between them had stopped steaming. You have a daughter, she said. He glanced down before he could stop himself, and she followed his gaze to where his phone had briefly lit up with a message preview before going dark again. Clara, he said. She's 11. She's with my mother tonight. Her mother? Gone, he said, not elaborating. Fiona didn't push. That was the second thing he noticed about her, that she knew when not to push. They sat in the Lakeshore Grill until 9:15, which was later than Edmund had planned to be out on a weeknight, and when he finally said he should get going, Fiona reached into the small bag on her armrest and took out a card and held it toward him. If you're ever looking for restoration work, she said, we own a building on Elgin Street, 1912. Nobody has touched it properly since 1978. He took the card. It read Adler Properties. Fiona Adler, president. He did not say anything about the president part. He put the card in his jacket pocket and helped her navigate around a chair someone had pushed out carelessly from a nearby table, and then he held the door, and she went out into the cold October night, and he watched until her adapted vehicle had pulled out of the lot. He stood in the doorway for a moment longer than necessary. Then he went home. He did not call for 3 weeks. This was not strategy. He was finishing a project on a stone church in Westport, the kind of job that required everything he had, 7 days a week, because the east wall had developed a crack that ran from the foundation to the eave, and if you did not understand exactly why a wall cracked before you fixed it, the crack would come back inside of 5 years. He had 2 men working with him, both of them good, and he spent most of November on scaffolding in the cold with a coffee thermos and a level, doing the slow work of listening to a building. Clara left a drawing on the kitchen table one morning. It was a house, tall and narrow with windows that were slightly crooked, the way children draw windows, and 2 figures standing in front of it. One tall, one small. Who's this? He asked her. Use, she said, pouring cereal. And our house. Our house doesn't look like that. Our house is boring, Clara said. This is the house we'll have someday. He propped the drawing up against the fruit bowl and left it there. The church job wrapped on a Friday. He sat in his truck in the parking lot for a few minutes after the last of his crew had gone, looking at the east wall in the fading light. And it looked right. It looked like it was going to hold. He drove home. He fed Clara dinner. After she went to bed, he sat at the kitchen table for a while with the card from his jacket pocket in front of him. He called on Saturday morning. Fiona answered on the second ring. I wondered, she said without preamble. I was finishing a job, he said. I know, the church in Westport. I saw the photos on your company website. He wasn't sure what to do with that. He filed it away. The building on Elgin, he said. Can I see it? Tuesday, she said. 9 o'clock. The building on Elgin Street was a 4-story commercial property from 1912, brick exterior, limestone detailing above the windows, and a corner entrance that had been poorly converted at some point in the 1980s into something that bore no relationship to the original design. Someone had put a drop ceiling inside at some point. Someone else had covered the original fir floors with linoleum. Edmund stood in the main floor space and felt the particular quiet sadness of a building that had been neglected by people who had not understood what they had. "The city wants to landmark it," Fiona said. She was behind him, navigating around a section of warped flooring that she had noted without comment. "That process is underway. It's been underway for 2 years. Why hasn't it resolved? Because there's an adjacent property owner who has been filing interventions." She said the word interventions the way you say a word that has been used against you too many times. "His name is Boyd Lester. He owns the lot to the north. He wants this property included in a development assembly. If the landmark designation goes through, it can't be demolished, which complicates his plans. How? His development needs a certain footprint to be viable. Without this lot, he's short." She paused. "He's been working on it for 3 years. He's good at bureaucratic delay." Edmund walked to the northeast corner and looked up at where the original ceiling had been. You could see the ghost of it, the plaster line above the drop tiles. What's above? 3 floors of original loft space, almost untouched, and the roof, the structural timber on the roof is Douglas fir, 12 by 12, and it's still solid. "I had an engineer look at it in 2019. He looked at her. "I bought this building for a reason," she said. "I know what it is." He nodded. He believed her. They spent 2 hours going through the building. He took photographs and made notes in a small notebook with a mechanical pencil, the kind of notes that were partly words and partly quick diagrams, the shorthand of someone who had been doing this long enough to have his own language for it. Fiona kept pace with him, floor by floor. The upper floors had a freight elevator, old but functional, and she pointed out things he would have missed. A section of original glazed brick behind drywall that someone had left partially exposed, a pattern in the floor that indicated where the original interior partition had been. "You've studied this building," he said. "For 5 years," she said. "Since before I bought it." Outside at noon, they stood on the sidewalk in front of the corner entrance. The limestone above the windows had some deterioration, spalling, a little staining, but it was not catastrophic. The brick was in better shape than he'd expected. "What do you want done?" he asked. "Everything," she said. "Properly. No shortcuts." She looked at him. "I don't want it to look restored. I want it to look like itself again." That was the right way to say it. He had worked for clients who wanted their old buildings to look new, which was always a mistake, always ended up looking like a lie. The goal was not to erase the years. The goal was to make the building honest about what it was. "I'll put together a proposal," he said. "One more thing," Fiona said. She had her hands resting on the push rims of her chair in the way she always seemed to, ready, but still. "Boyd Lester's intervention goes to a city hearing in February. The Architectural Heritage Committee. They'll be deciding whether the landmark designation has merit. If you take this job, I'll need you at that hearing. Not to testify, just to be present. I may need someone who can speak to the structural integrity, the historical value, if they ask." Edmund looked at the building for a moment, at the limestone, at the ghost of the original cornice line you could still see if you knew what to look for. "All right," he said. He told Clara about the project that evening. She was at the kitchen table doing homework, and he made soup while he talked. Real soup, from a carcass he'd had in the freezer, the kind that took time, and he described the building the way he always described his work to her, which was not simplified. Clara had been listening to him talk about buildings since she was old enough to listen, and she had developed, at 11, a genuine understanding of why old things mattered. "Does the owner know what it is?" Clara asked. "She does," Edmund said. "She knows exactly what it is." Clara looked up from her homework. She had her mother's eyes, dark and direct, and she used them the way her mother had, as instruments of precision. "She?" Clara said. "Her name is Fiona Adler," Edmund said. "She owns several properties." Clara looked at him for another moment, and then went back to her homework with the expression of someone who has noted something for later. The proposal took him 10 days. It was 42 pages, with a timeline, a phased cost structure, a materials specification, and a section at the back on the original construction methods. He had found the architect's name in the city archives and tracked down some of the original drawings, which told him things about the building's intentions that no amount of physical inspection could fully replace. He had not included that section because she asked for it. He included it because it seemed like something she would want to know. He sent it on a Wednesday. She called on Thursday morning. "The archive drawings," she said when he picked up. "I thought you'd want to see them. I've been trying to find those for 3 years," she said. "How did you get them?" "I know someone in the Heritage Records office," he said. "We've worked together on other projects." A pause. "You put them in the proposal?" "Yes. Most contractors don't do things that aren't billable," she said. "I'm not most contractors." Another pause longer. "No," she said, "you're not." She approved the proposal the following week. They started in January. Working with Fiona Adler was not like working with most clients. Most clients disappeared after the contract was signed and reappeared when something went wrong or when they wanted to change something. Fiona showed up. Not every day. She ran a company. She had a full life, but regularly without announcement, moving through the site in her chair with the same careful efficiency she brought to everything, asking questions that were not the questions of someone checking up, but of someone genuinely wanting to understand. She never got in the way. She had a talent for knowing when to stay back and when to come closer, which was rarer than it sounded. One afternoon in late January, Edmund was up on the second floor, working on the window restoration, stripping the painted-over wood back to the original, a slow and careful process, and he heard the elevator open and her chair on the fir floor, and then she was there, watching him work. "That's the original casing," she said. "Yes. Under about 8 layers of paint." He held up a small scraper. "You can feel the profile under there. It's intact." She came closer and looked. She reached out and ran one finger along the revealed edge of the casing, feeling the profile. He noticed that she did not ask permission to touch it, which was the right instinct. It was her building. "My father used to say you could tell everything about a building by its trim," she said. "He was right again," Edmund said. She smiled. It was the first time he had seen her smile without any wariness in it, and it changed her face considerably. He went back to stripping paint. She stayed for another 20 minutes, not saying much, and then she left. Boyd Lester's people contacted Edmund's company in early February. Not Lester directly, through an intermediary, a man named Grant Fowler, who described himself as a development consultant and called Edmund's work number and was friendly in the careful way of someone who is deciding how friendly to be. "We're just reaching out to some of the contractors working in the area," Fowler said. "Mr. Lester has a number of projects coming up. Heritage properties, interestingly enough. He's become very interested in adaptive reuse." "Is that right?" Edmund said. "He'd love to sit down with you, talk about potential opportunities." Edmund looked at the wall of his office, which had a framed drawing of the Elgin Street building on it, the archive drawing, a reproduction he'd had printed. "I don't think my schedule allows for that right now." Of course. I'll leave my number." He wrote the number down and did not call it. He told Fiona the next morning. She was quiet for a moment. "He's done that before," she said, "with 2 other people involved in this project. He's looking for leverage, information, or," she paused, "a way to make things complicated." "He won't get either from me," Edmund said. She looked at him in the way she sometimes looked at him, that careful, assessing look, reading small print. "I know," she said. "Then thank you for telling me. You needed to know." The hearing was on a Tuesday in mid-February at City Hall, in a meeting room that smelled of recycled air and carpet cleaner. Edmund arrived at 8:30, a half-hour early, and found Fiona already there, at the end of the table where she had positioned herself with documents and a laptop and a thermos of coffee. She was wearing a dark blazer, and she looked like someone who had been preparing for this for a long time, which she had. Boyd Lester was there too, with 2 lawyers and an architect, and a binder that was very thick and very organized. He was a large man in his 60s, with the particular authority of someone who had been successful in rooms like this many times and expected to be successful again. He glanced at Edmund and visibly did not place him. The committee, 7 members, chaired by a woman named Pauline Bertrand, who had been on the Architectural Heritage Committee for over a decade, worked through the agenda in order. Lester's lawyer presented their intervention first. The development would bring significant economic benefit. The building's heritage value was limited. The designation would create an undue constraint on private property rights. It was competently argued. Edmund had heard the same argument about different buildings many times. Then Fiona spoke. She did not use notes, except for the archive drawings, which she had printed at a large scale and mounted on boards. She walked through the history of the building. The architect, James Beaumont, who had designed 14 commercial properties in the city between 1908 and 1921, of which only 4 remained standing. She described the construction methods, the load-bearing masonry, the timber framing, the original mechanical systems that were still partially in place. She talked about the glazed brick and the limestone and the fir floors, and she talked about them the way someone talks about things they have spent years learning to care about properly. Then she turned to the structural report. Edmund had written it over 3 weeks in January, in his own language, plain, specific, without hedging. He had described what was there and what it meant and what it would take to restore it, and he had attached the archive drawings with annotations in his own hand. It was not a document designed to impress. It was a document designed to be true. Fiona read from it, not extensively, a few key passages, the ones that answered the claims Lester's people had made. And then she said, "The structural engineer and restoration specialist who prepared this report is present today if the committee has questions." Pauline Bertrand looked down the table at Edmund. "Mr. Barr," she said, "do you stand by the findings in this report?" "Yes," he said. "In your assessment, is this structure worth preserving?" He looked at the mounted drawings, at the profile of the original cornice line rendered in pencil by a man named James Beaumont in 9/11. "In my experience," Edmund said, "buildings like this one, this particular quality of construction, this degree of surviving original material, come up once, maybe twice in a career. You don't replace what's in those walls. You can build something new on that lot, but it won't be this. This is here, or it isn't." The room was quiet for a moment. Lester's lawyer leaned over and said something to Lester. Lester looked at Edmund with the expression of someone who has not anticipated a particular obstacle. The committee broke at noon and reconvened at 2. When they came back, Pauline Bertrand read the result without preamble. The landmark designation was approved, 6 votes to 1. In the hallway outside the meeting room, Fiona stopped her chair beside him and looked up at him. "You didn't have to say it like that," she said. "About once or twice in a career." "It's true," he said. "I know it's true." She was quiet for a moment. "But you didn't have to say it." He understood what she meant. He had not said it for the committee. Or not only for the committee. They stood in the hallway while the city's heating system did its imperfect work, and people moved past them with coats and document folders, and neither of them said anything else for a while. Clara's drawing was still on the kitchen table at home, he thought, the tall, narrow house with the crooked windows. He had not moved it. "There's a building in Hamilton I've been looking at," Fiona said. 1908, former textile mill. The owner wants to sell. Edmund looked at her. "If you're interested," she said, "when the Elgin work is done, tell me about it," he said. She did. They stood in the hallway for another 20 minutes while the city moved around them, and she told him about the textile mill in Hamilton, and its original sawtooth roof, and its north-facing glazing, and its floors that were still true after 115 years. And he listened the way he listened to buildings, closely, without interrupting, letting the structure reveal itself. Outside, the February light was thin and cold and entirely honest, the way February light in Ontario always is, and it fell through the tall windows of the City Hall corridor and lay across the floor in long pale strips, and in it, 2 people stood together talking about an old building that deserved to last.